They were the most successful female vocal group in recorded history.
With Florence Ballard, Mary Wilson, and Diana Ross, it was a planetary alignment.
I mean, everyone loved the Supremes.
Flo really had the voice.
She just liked to belt out her songs.
Florence could reach those notes.
Not only did she have the big voice, she had that Dorothy Dandridge glamour.
From inner city Detroit straight up to international superstar.
She was so down to earth, you really didn't think of her as being the superstar.
I think she was very happy at Motown. I think the sadness was within her life.
The bigger they got, the bigger the issues got. The more depressed she got.
Ordinary arguments or disagreements, it would become for Florence a bigger explosion.
Then when she was kicked out of the group, she went straight down.
Tried to keep her tragedies inside of her.
She had totally just destroyed herself because she couldn't live with the pain.
We lost the star. Lost the star.
Uncompromised, unrecognized, unparalleled, unsung. The story of Florence Ballard. January 2007, at the Golden Globe Awards, actress Jennifer Hudson wins Best Supporting Actress for her performance in the hit movie Dreamgirls. She portrayed Effie White, a character loosely based on Florence Ballard of the Supremes. It's a role that would also win Hudson an Oscar.
I just want to dedicate this award to a lady who never really got a fair chance. This award is for Florence Ballard. You will never be forgotten. Thank you.
Flo was the founding member of Motown's most glamorous group. She, Diana Ross, and Mary Wilson captivated millions of fans with tight harmonies, pitch-perfect vocals, and unmatched style and grace. Together, they scored more #1 hits than any female group in history.
And now it's the gals who had 3 #1 songs in 1964, singing one of them, Baby Love. Welcome again, the Supremes!
The Supremes reigned supreme in the 60s. They were it. They were very elegant. Their look, their style, their personas, everything. It just worked in a way that was palatable to America at large.
I mean, the Supremes were this unique group. They were the biggest pop act of that time.
But for most fans, Florence was little more than a voice singing in the shadows behind the Supremes' star singer, Diana Ross. And in the decades following those glory years, her identity faded from public memory. That is, until Dreamgirls.
These guys were inspired by our career, the Supremes' career. And they had to recreate it so that it wasn't about us.
Like Dreamgirls star Effie White, Florence found fame with a girl group, was kicked out at the height of their success, then struggled to resurrect her career.
That really was very close to Florence. You know, her leaving and how she left and all that.
And like the character of Effie White, Florence was a singer with a rich and commanding voice. Though rarely given the chance to showcase her talents in the Supremes, she lived to sing. And when the microphone was in her hands, she made the most of it.
Oh, my baby's coming home tomorrow. Ain't that good news? Yeah.
She was like the Etta James or the Aretha Franklin kind of singer because she had so much soul.
Ain't that news? Yeah, ain't that news?
It was a very soulful voice, but has pain and sorrow in it. And it's very powerful, and it's very melodic. It's no wonder that her name, Ballard, sounds like ballad. She's a very good singer.
Ain't that good news? Yeah, ain't that news?
But the final chapter of Florence Ballard's life turned out to be less of a dream than a nightmare.
Only thing about Dreamgirls is it ended up a happy thing. She was able to come back, and we all, the fans, myself, we all wish that had happened with Florence.
She was attempting to make a comeback in terms of her career and recording, and she was still beloved by many, many people.
Every company, every show business legend has its tragedies, but I think the greatest tragedy of the Motown legacy is Flo Ballard.
Florence Glenda Ballard, nicknamed Flo or Blondie, was born in Detroit in 1943 to Jesse Lambert Ballard and his wife Lurlee. Her parents had migrated from the South, seeking a better future in the Motor City.
They met and fell in love. He felt like he could make a good living here in the auto factory, and so that's what he did. He came here and he got hired at General Motors.
Though Jesse Ballard held a steady job, he struggled to keep his family fed. Flo was the 9th of 15 children.
We had a very loving mother and father. My mother was always a heart-giving person, and it hurt her a lot when she couldn't do the things that she wanted to do, such as take us places that she knew she couldn't afford.
But for Florence, it was a time filled with warm memories. Later in her life, she shared some of them with Peter Benjaminson, author of The Lost Supreme.
I jumped at the opportunity to record the life story of such a major star.
My childhood was very bright. Of course, we were poor, but it was a happy type of family. It was a big family.
We didn't have toys, bikes, or anything like that to play with. She would always find her friends with toys, and we would ride their bikes, and we'd use their roller skates.
It was also a time when Florence discovered her lifelong passion, singing.
When I was 5 years old, I remember singing in churches, at home, in front of relatives, and I used to even open a window in the window and sing out the window, mostly Christmas songs.
We went to church with our mother and listened to the choir singing, and one day we decided we would join the choir. My dad saw that we liked singing, so he went and bought a record player. He should never have done that. Non-stop, we were listening to records non-stop.
Maxine, Florence, and I, we would stand around the record player and sing as though we were a girl group.
She just liked to belt out her songs. She always had this smile on her face because she loved singing.
During the 50s, the Ballards moved to what was then a new housing development in Detroit, called the Brewster Douglas Projects.
These are the tall buildings. One of these buildings, Mary Wilson's family, Mary Wilson and her family, her mother stayed there. Diana Ross stayed down at the other end. This little playground right here, we used to come here sometime and play. We used to walk around all throughout the projects and sing.
Florence met Mary Wilson at Bishop Elementary School, where they both performed in a talent show.
She had the place mesmerized because she came on singing like an aria. She did Ave Maria, and her voice, she says, Later on in high school, our teacher, Mrs. Bro, wanted us to become opera singers. Years later, however, she came back. She says, I'm so glad that you girls didn't listen to me.
Detroit was a city rich in music. Blues and jazz clubs lined the streets, and pop sounds on the radio inspired singing groups throughout the city.
Singing at that time, and the music at that time, everybody wanted to sing. Everybody wanted to be a singer.
It was nothing to walk anywhere and hear somebody singing, and all kind of wonderful music was coming out of apartment buildings.
You had the Little Richards, and Jackie Wilson, the Coasters, and it was like a wave. It was sweeping, America.
And it wouldn't be long before a young trio would create their own magnificent wave and sweep America. Florence Ballard was barely in her teens when being in the right place at the right time put her on the path of a singing career.
We were just sitting on the porch in the projects, minding our own business, and this red and white Cadillac passed by. And all of a sudden, this guy started looking in our direction. And I turned to her and I said, I guess this guy is looking at us.
That guy was Milton Jenkins, a local promoter and manager of a singing group called the Primes. On this day, he was scouting talent to put together a female version of the Primes, to be called the Primettes.
And I pointed to Flo, and he looked at her and he said, are you interested in singing?
Florence was definitely interested. She got her parents' permission to audition for Jenkins.
Flo put together the whole package. You know, she punched out the words, she got the melody right, she had rhythm. This is a cappella, you know, not with anyone behind her.
Jenkins was impressed. He asked Florence to recruit other girls to help fill out the group.
She asked me if I wanted to join the group, and I said, yeah, you know. So she said, well, they're going to ask Diane. You know Diane? I'm like, yeah, she lives right across the street.
Diane was Diana Ross. A friend named Betty McGlown rounded out the quartet. For their audition, Florence picked a Ray Charles tune called The Nighttime is the Right Time.
And so she started singing that. I chimed in, Diane chimed in, da-da-da. Then there's a part where the Raylettes comes in with this higher part. And so Diane just chimed in with that. And Betty and I were doing the backgrounds and we sang. And so when we finished, we were all like, wow, that was cool. I mean, this was the first time we started singing together.
Soon, the Primettes were performing on weekends at sock hops, union halls, and local cabarets, sharing the stage with other young talents like future Temptations singer Otis.
Sock hops. We would meet up with them at, you know, different places, you know, oh, y'all leaving, or we just coming in to do it.
And we started doing cabarets. Oh, we were out of sight. They were throwing money at us. And don't think we didn't pick it up.
Florence could reach those notes, you know, and she would just dramatize and emphasize it. So she had that real cutting-edge commercial sounding voice, you know, so she could be a showstopper.
Yeah, but not only did she have the big voice, you know, she had that Dorothy Dandridge glamour, okay? And Dorothy Dandridge and Lena Horne, that was the it for us, you know. And she had that look.
Had Florence not been a singer, you know, I don't know what she would have been, but that made her work. That was her passion, her singing, because she could sing.
And like most of Detroit's aspiring singers, the Primettes set their sights on the city's premier record label, Motown. The company had been founded just a year earlier in 1959 by Berry Gordy Jr., a fine songwriter and an exceptional entrepreneur.
At the helm of the company, you had a visionary. Berry Gordy knew how to mine the talent that existed in Detroit.
If you wanted to be anybody, you either were a school teacher, you worked in the factory, or you went to Motown. Because there was nothing else in Detroit. Obviously, Motown was the best place everybody wanted to be. I want to be famous, go to Motown.
Motown's roster soon included talents like Smokey Robinson, Marvin Gaye, and Mary Wells. So when the Primettes came calling on Berry Gordy, the group had their work cut out for them.
So we made sure we were all, you know, dressed really good and looked neat, and we went there knowing we were going to get this contract because we just knew we could sing.
But confidence and talent weren't enough.
He told them gently to just come back in a couple of years, graduate high school first.
We just thought he didn't like us. And I recall Florence, as we were going out the door, Florence said, he can't be all that good if he didn't see how good we were. We didn't realize at the time that it wasn't that we weren't good, that it was more like we were just too young.
The Primettes went back to performing on local stages, but they didn't let go of their dream.
We were very in tune with what we wanted to do, and we had made up our mind that we wanted to record, and we wanted to record with the top. Motown at that time was the top for Detroit.
The Primettes would get their wish and more. But before that happened, Florence's own life would be abruptly torn apart.
My God, this happened to my friend. You could tell that she was not the same person. When I met Florence and Diane and Betty, I knew what I needed to do for the rest of my life.
We developed such a bond. We spent every waking hour together that we could, unless we were in school. We rehearsed together. We went to dances. We did everything together. We were real friends.
Motown was a shared dream and where the girls wanted to be. But in the summer of 1960, they were just another girl group in the local music scene. One night, Florence went to a show at Detroit's popular Greystone Ballroom.
She went there with my brother. Some kind of way they got separated. A friend, or who she thought was a friend, asked her if she wanted to ride home, and she said yes. And she got in the car, and she got raped.
This totally destroyed Florence. It really totally destroyed her. For about 2 or 3 months afterwards, her family protected her.
She never revealed the name of the person that raped her, even though she knew that it was wrong what he did. She just didn't want to cause problems with him or his family.
Florence withdrew from those closest to her and stopped singing.
We couldn't understand what was happening. Why all of a sudden, one day, we just didn't hear from Florence. Diana and I just had no idea what was going on, and it really hurt us. Eventually, Florence called us or got us together and said she wanted to talk to us, and she told us about the whole event.
She kind of never got over it. And I think as she got older, it actually kind of got worse.
To help heal her broken spirit, Mary and Diana implored Florence to sing again.
Slowly, she started coming back to us, but it took a while for her to start singing again. But you could tell that she was not the same person.
The offices at Motown became Florence's refuge. She and the other Primettes started hanging out there after school.
They would just be sitting on the steps. They just wouldn't go away. And that was their strategy, I guess. We're just going to be here. We're going to be in your face. We're not going anywhere. And you're going to have to do something sooner or later.
One day, one of the producers ran out of the studio, and he says, we got to put this background and some hand claps on this record, and nobody's here to do it. We said, we'll do it.
The 4 singers were hired for background work, but Betty McClown soon left the group to focus on her new marriage. She was replaced by Barbara Martin.
So every day after school, we was at Motown, making $78 a week doing background singing. For a high school kid, that was great. You know, it was an income. We would background for Mary Wells, Marvin Gaye, Marv Johnson.
Then they'd come back every day, hanging around the lobby, flirting with the male Motowners, doing secretarial chores. They were such a part of the company, but they had to be given their own chance to record.
I think Mr. Gordy could see who they could be.
By 1961, Motown had released 4 singles by the Primettes, including a showcase for Florence that became a local radio hit titled Buttered Popcorn.
My baby like buttered popcorn.
I turned the radio up as loud as I could, and I went screaming through the house. You know, she's on the radio, she's on the radio. Listen, listen, I can hear her voice.
Do you like it, baby? You know what I like buttered popcorn.
None of the singles registered on the national charts, but that didn't faze the Primettes.
We were just so happy. I mean, we were not trying to get the #1. We just wanted to get our, get more records and hear them on the radio.
But Berry Gordy believed the group needed a change, starting with their name.
Oh, holy crap, no one's going to know us if we change our names. Well, no one knew us anyway, but I mean, in Detroit, our world was just Detroit.
I wrote down 3 names and put them in a hat, and Florence pulled the name of the Supremes.
Well, first Diane said, nah, it sounds like a dance group. I bet you she's glad to this day that group was named the Supremes. I thought it was a great choice. I still do. Supremes is supreme.
Since then, I've been asked what the other 2 names were, and I have not a clue.
For the next year, the Supremes recorded in the studio and honed their skills on the road with Motown's family of rising stars.
going up and down the highways and doing those one-nighters. We encountered a lot of racial tension, but that didn't break our spirit because we just enjoyed what we were doing.
You can look at it and say, my God, you guys went through all that. But it was fun to us. It was an adventure.
With no hits, the Supremes are often listed at the bottom of the bill, if they were mentioned at all. But that was about to change. By 1962, the Supremes were at a crossroads. They'd recorded a dozen singles without cracking the charts for a record company that ran on hits.
They were referred to as the no-hit Supremes, but they would be in their recording just like all the acts that Barry had at the time, trying to get that one that would put them on the map.
I don't even think our name appeared on the marquee. Everybody else's name was up there. Ours. We were just mad. We wanted to hit so bad we didn't know what to do.
Barbara Martin left the group that year to be with her husband and new baby. No one replaced her, leaving Florence, Mary, and Diana as a trio. Berry Gordy was determined to get them on the charts. He enlisted the songwriting team of Eddie and Brian Holland and Lamont Dozier.
We were very excited because they were like top writing team. We know now, hey, we're on our way, hey, no more no-hit Supremes, you know. We know that the other groups will send us behind our backs.
The song that would give the Supremes their first #1 hit had already been rejected by Motown's top girl group, the Marvelettes. The Supremes weren't crazy about the song either.
Finally, they wrote Where'd Our Love Go? Holland, Holland. We said, we don't like this record. It didn't sound like nothing to us. We wanted something like Please, Mr. Postman.
And they said, no, trust us, you know, Brian Holland and Eddie. Trust us, we got the bomb, we got the bomb.
I mean, you just hear that opening of Where Did Our Love Go Today? You just, it's just perfection. And that's the first time Barry made arrangements to fly them back. It was the first time they'd ever been on a plane.
Our life changed in like 100 degrees, you know, because one night we were no-hit Supremes, and then the next night we went to Europe to promote the record over there.
After years of singing together, Mary, Diana, and Florence had made it. Florence was 21 years old.
She was walking on cloud 9. A whole new world opened up to her. These girls that came from the projects are hitting the big time.
Soon the Supremes were touring all over the world and singing in the best concert halls and nightclubs from New York to LA.
They were constantly working. At the time it was thought, and they may have been right, that you had to keep hitting while the anvil was hot.
The #1 recording group in the country, the Supremes.
Between 1964 and 1965, the Supremes had 5 consecutive #1 hits. Where Did Our Love Go? Baby Love, Come See About Me, Stop in the Name of Love, and Back in My Arms Again. They became, as Motown put it, the sound of young America.
White kids are enjoying the Motown sound as much as, the African-American kids who were plugged into it, from the beginning. And of course the material and the presentation. I mean, you just couldn't beat that package of Diana, Florence, and Mary.
After Where'd Our Love Go, we didn't have any flops. Everything we put out turned to gold. There wasn't one that I disliked. I loved every record.
The string of hits also sealed Diana's position as the group's lead singer and its star.
The sexiness, the coquettishness, her big eyes, the way really she was a departure.
Venues that rarely booked black performers welcomed the Supremes with open arms.
At that time, we were getting all kinds of offers. Played Coconut Grove, Copacabana.
We were 3 happy human beings because our dreams had come true.
But for Florence Ballard, the dream wouldn't last.
Florence became a problem to this big machine Berry Gordy set up. He would have been a fool to let Florence ruin it.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a little of the Motown sound, and we'd like to thank you for making some of these our biggest hits. It's 'cause I'm lonely, my smiles have all turned, but tears won't wash away the fear.
For 3 magical years in the 1960s, everything the Supremes sang turned to gold.
I believe they were so popular because they had catchy lyrics, strong melodies with Mary Wilson, Florence Ballard, and Diana Ross. It was a planetary alignment.
Their success didn't change Florence's personality.
Florence was very down to earth. I mean, people could just call them off the street and knock on her door and she would open the door. And I think that's what made her stand out, and people loved her so much.
She embraced everyone that she met. I can remember family get-togethers, and we would invite Florence to attend, and she was just a regular person. She was an in-law, that's all. She was not the superstar.
But when it came to singing, Florence was every inch a star.
In those early years, she actually lit up on stage. You could feel her enthusiasm about it.
Florence also discovered she had a flair for comedy and enjoyed flinging one-liners on the stage. Soon, the Supremes incorporated them into their act.
Well, you see, if I decide I want to get married, they come right over and talk me out of it.
Oh, that's a good
right. When I want to get married, they say, go right ahead.
She had a laughter like I always thought of Santa Claus. I mean, it just came from her soul, and it was infectious. Everybody would start laughing.
I was always the one that would say something funny and have everybody laughing. And it's a good feeling when you can do that.
But with rising fame came growing demands. The Supremes' schedule included nonstop travel, back-to-back recording sessions, press interviews, and endless stage shows.
I think it was a point of Mary and Diana loved it so much, and Florence began to not love it as much.
We didn't do things together anymore. The only time we would see each other would be in the dressing room or on stage. And rooms, we were all on different floors and miles apart. So it seemed like the group was just splitting somehow in that matter.
That was the rough part, seeing the friendship breaking down, not from the three of us, but from outside influences coming in.
It was hard for her to travel. She was afraid of flying. And because she came from such a big family, she always wanted to be home. And, you know, between her recording and being on the road maybe 300 days out of a year, that became very stressful to her.
I was out there just having myself a great old time. Diane was having, a great time. But Florence, it really bothered her that her life was no longer her life.
From their days together in the Brewster Projects, Diana, Mary, and Florence treated each other as equals. But these days, one member was more equal than others.
Diana, was being catered to because she was the lead singer. Diana did all the vocals. And Florence felt that they weren't a group anymore. And that was very hurtful to her. She was very upset by that.
Friends say that one incident in particular devastated Flo. During their stage shows, she always sang the Barbra Streisand hit, People.
She always got a standing ovation. And one night, she was hoarse and couldn't sing. And she asked Diana to sing it for her. And after that, it was Diana's song. And that kind of broke her heart.
Diane wanted to be the lead singer. I felt that I was suited better doing some tunes. I felt that the relationship, as close as I thought we were, it just should have been spread around, but it wasn't. Diane wanted the complete lead, the complete control of the group.
She still had this thing as all for one and one for all. We're going to be a group forever. And things change, and she didn't want them to change.
Not one to keep her feelings inside for long, Flo began to lash out.
Flo started reacting badly to the fact that Diana was now not only doing the lead on every song, but that Flo and Mary were being literally pushed back further on the stage while Diana was moving further out front.
Mary would tell me, just don't say anything whenever, anything is said to you. I said, well, I can't hold it, I have to. So I would say something back.
She started to rebel, and that brought on a lot of problems.
Well, yeah, she started drinking. We'd all started drinking, and we have our little drink, and then Florence maybe have a few more, and then she would be, like that would just affect her, and it just escalated more and more.
Many believe that Flo's drinking fueled her angry outbursts and erratic behavior. But those closest to her suspected that Flo's real problem lay deeper, in the untreated trauma of her teenage sexual assault.
All of this was still festering, so when we would have like ordinary arguments or disagreements or whatever, it would become for Florence a bigger explosion. And so she would explode more. And people who didn't know her, who didn't know what had happened, they just assumed this was Florence being bad.
She had a lot of issues going on that no one knew about. Mary knew. And Mary knew how hard it was for her. The bigger they got, the bigger the issues got. The more depressed she got.
And there were many, many people who tried to help Flo. Diane tried. I know Barry tried.
Mary talked to her till she was blue in the face. If you just do this, if you just do that, just go out on stage and just work.
But Florence's clashes with Barry and Diana became more frequent and more heated. It all came to a head one night on stage in July of 1967.
This particular incident at the Flamingo in Las Vegas, I had had me a few drinks, and they kept calling me fat so much until I went on stage and I poked my stomach out as far as I could, but I did my show.
A member of the Elegant Supremes bearing her stomach on stage was the last straw for Berry Gordy. He sent Florence back home to Detroit. She never sang again as a Supreme.
Florence became a problem to this big machine Berry Gordy set up. And he would have been a fool to let Florence ruin it.
Florence's place in the Supremes was taken by Cindy Birdsong, a singer who bore an uncanny physical resemblance to Florence.
They'd been wooing Sydney to come in. Sydney was a veteran of the Patti LaBelle and the Bluebells. She sang background. She looked enough like Florence that it's not going to be a radical rethinking of the image of the group either.
Florence had chances to get back and to straighten things out before she was put out the group. But you see, she had already gone too far with the destruction of herself.
She was angry with Berry, but she knew the truth. It was her fault why she was kicked out. She made a mistake that she could not take back.
Florence Ballard vowed to rebuild her career, but her run of bad luck had only just begun. After leaving the Supremes, Florence Ballard went back to Detroit. With no lawyer present, she signed a release agreement from Motown that prevented her from collecting any more royalties from the Supremes' music, or from ever using the Supremes' name in conjunction with her career. In return, she was offered $15,000.
Motown was a place, they were about business and controlling all the rights they could control. And so when they negotiated a deal with Florence, it seems like it wasn't much of a negotiation. It seems like she basically signed it.
Even in the 60s, $15,000 wasn't much to write home about.
She was sad when she was removed from the group, but she didn't give up. She didn't go around moping. She wanted to just kind of get on with her life.
In February 1968, Florence married Tommy Chapman, a chauffeur with Motown. They decided to launch Flo's solo career.
The problem with that was Tommy wanted to be her manager. Tommy was not equipped to be her manager. But at that time, Florence didn't trust many people.
That year, ABC Records offered Florence a record deal. She began recording an album that included heartfelt standards like Going Out of My Head.
Well, I think I'm going out of my head. Yes, I think I'm going out of my head. You.
She was part of a brand. I'm sure the record company that signed her wanted a Supremes experience, because that's what she was branded as, and that's what people do. They wanted the gowns and the hair and the cute vocals.
But after ABC released 2 singles that didn't sell, Florence's album was put on the shelf. Her recordings would not be released for more than 30 years.
We had, unfortunately, one big problem, and that was the contract stipulation that Flo had signed that she could not use, formerly of the Supremes on the record label.
Florence Ballard's name without formerly of the Supremes is not as marketable. She could have made her own money, and she'd really been able to exploit the Supremes connection.
Around the same time, Flo became pregnant with twin girls, the first 2 of her 3 children.
Flo seemed to be very, very happy with, impending motherhood, and we were happy for her. But in terms of a career, it was probably the worst possible timing.
Florence lost her record contract and then discovered she was broke. She had managed to hire a lawyer to negotiate a better financial settlement with Motown, but instead of delivering the money to Florence, her lawyer stole it.
He just totally took the money and ran. So she lost everything.
Including her marriage.
When the money was there, Tommy was there. When the money started dwindling, Tommy wasn't there.
She had been beaten more than once by Tommy Chapman. She had at that time a black eye and several other bruises.
By the early 1970s, Flo could no longer make payments on her house.
I began to drink, and I would walk at night, not knowing where I was going. It was like I was in a daze, just walking. It was like I didn't care anymore. I had given up, and I kept saying, okay, the money's gone, the car is gone, and now they're taking my house.
She was about to lose the house, and Diana had written her a check to pay her mortgage. But Florence was too paranoid to take the check. And eventually, she lost her home.
Homeless and with 3 young children to support, Florence turned to her family.
She showed up on my doorstep after she lost her home. She had a bag of clothes, her children. She was carrying baby Lisa, Mac. She said, I need a place to stay.
In November 1974, desperate and exhausted, Florence checked herself into the Henry Ford Hospital.
I was completely broke down. One of the doctors, I said, I'd like to see a psychiatrist. So he says, for what? I said, I felt like I was really, crazy. I said, well, I can't understand why I keep drinking and why I keep feeling so bad all the time. He said, it's easy. He said, you lost everything you had.
I was a reporter for the Detroit Free Press in '75, and the editor came up to me and said, listen, I hear that one of the Supremes is on welfare. I drove out to her house, interviewed her, and then found out it was true.
Benjaminson wrote a feature story about Florence. It made the national news. A few months later, Florence went back to Henry Ford Hospital and asked to be treated for alcoholism.
In the hospital, classes were good. And some of the things he said made a lot of sense. Like, you live for one day and don't worry about tomorrow, because tomorrow is not promised, and it's not.
She was starting on another rise in her life that would have resulted in some kind of successful life.
The summer of '75, Florence was given a chance to perform once again. She sang at a benefit concert at Detroit's Ford Auditorium.
I saw that concert. The people went wild, and she was beautiful and was ready. So you could tell she was ready to go back and come back out here and do what she loved doing.
And when she saw the response that she got, she knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that she was on her way.
Florence even won a settlement against her lawyer. She used the money to buy a car and a house for her 3 daughters. Tommy moved back in too.
We're on Shaftesbury. This is the house that she purchased when she received her settlement. But she was very optimistic, and she had big plans of recording.
She was just the old Florence that I knew and loved. And it just didn't last long.
On February 21st, 1976, Florence Ballard collapsed in her home. She was taken to Mount Carmel Mercy Hospital in Detroit. The next morning, she died there from a blood clot to the heart. She was 32 years old.
I truly believe she would be singing to this day if she were alive, because that was her goal.
She said she would never give up. This is what I want her fans to know, that she never gave up.
When we had Florence's funeral, I remember saying, Florence, I'll take care of it. And people have often asked me, well, what did that mean? And I guess what it means is that wherever I am, Florence is. Whatever I do, Florence is there.
"30 years later, Maxine Ballard and Peter Benjaminson published books about Florence Ballard's life. The album she made as a solo artist was finally released. Dreamgirls has even made her a household name. And if Florence Ballard herself is no longer with us, what lingers is the sound and spirit of what she always treasured most, her music.
So what do you feel when you hear your own voice on the radio?
I turn the radio up. It sounds good to me. Then I say to myself, boy, that record sold a lot of copies. And nearly every one they played was a million seller.
So do you have regrets when you hear the song on the radio?
Regrets? Sometimes I do. And then I say to myself, would it be worth it to go back into it and the same thing happen again?